So hi there, welcome back to the channel, Paolo here. The model I would like to talk today is a kind of reprise of a subject that I made really back in time. I think it was a building of about 20 or 25 years ago. Should be 20 because the model is, as you can see, related to the Ferrari 333 SP. The Daytona winner was Daytona winner 98, so I guess the model should be from 99 or 2000, so only 22 years ago, soon 23. And so, well, what happens here? I got this model from, it was the BBR producer, back in time they used it also to do some items in 124 scale, and they were not so bad, but on the same line of Studio 27 models, so the concept was to provide a curbside model. Curbside means that have no openings parts, and it's just closer to see the shape of the car, And this car was a very strange vehicle produced by Ferrari that became very famous in the IMSA categories and in America, because it was basically not a real Ferrari, but it was mostly the Lara project made in behalf or in cooperation with Ferrari and using a Ferrari engine. The Ferrari was a 3.5 liters coming from, I think it was the 641 Formula One car, and no, what I'm saying, it was a 12 cylinder, I think, coming from. It was a strange story. There is everything in internet about the story of the engine, but it was in a way a kind of unit that was derived from the F50 motor, F50 Ferrari, the supercar, on the same line of Enzo, of the LaFerrari, of that type of supercar, and so the motor was a derivation of this unit with the differential box and everything, And in reality, the car never had the support from the real company, So Ferrari never made a real project like they're presenting right now in this day. This video has been made, and this is the end of October 2022, the moment I'm filming, And Ferrari just announced the new 296 GT3 and the new 499 hypercar, So in the hypercar project, it is Ferrari directly making the car and taking all the structure, around the car to make it competitive in a brand new category that are starting now with Porsche, BMW, and Peugeot involved. Instead, in this era, in the 90s, late 90s, Ferrari just charged the most skilled producer of prototypes we have in Italy. Is an incredible factory. It's basically exactly like Ferrari, It's exactly like to talk of another kind of Ferrari, but it's just dedicated on racer, So I think they just made one or two supercars, strange designers, And Dallara is this company making excellent racer, All the chassis, it's in the same line of Reynard, in the same line of Lola, and they just are technicians making. The engineer Dallara, Giancarlo Dallara, was involved in all the projects related to the Italian sports car from the 80s and the 90s, because he was one of the youngest engineers that have been taken by the old Ferrari in the factory when he fired completely the old management of Kitty and so on, coming from Alfa Romeo. So he was the new line, Today I think he's a guy of nearly 80 years old, if not more probably, and on the same line of Engineer Folghieri. So it was that type of generation, that also my father belongs to, because he was on the same university with them, just they were specialized in mechanical stuff and so on, and my father was in chemicals. So, but the group is anyway that type of engineers, and so the production of this Dallara 333 SP became quite strange, because they made the project and they made an excellent prototype of the car that was absolutely a winning car, but they never have the develop of the real Ferrari itself. So they were so much more concentrated in the end of the 90s, much more over Formula One. They wanted it. It was slightly before the arrival of Schumacher in Ferrari, so it was the beginning of the mighty era that Formula One had with Ferrari, and I think it was 7 world champion titles won by the great Schumacher, And so this project was not so much followed by the company itself, and it became a kind of lemon in the series. The most famous racer we had about this vehicle, in my opinion, was the Momo car. The Momo owned so he didn't hire the car, he didn't loan the car, he owned it, he bought it directly from Ferrari. It was a 333 SP, owned by Giampiero Moretti, the old founder and owner of the company Momo. Today is no longer an Italian company, today I think they are a Chinese or Japanese brand, you know. And he went nearly bankrupt for this car because he bought the car from the Ferrari, and then he had to make all the development by his own, you know. And I remember that I seen this car racing in Monza several times. So Moretti was used to live in Milano too. Is a suburb, a very luxury suburb of Milano, and I met the nephew in my shop, so it was very interesting to talk with these people. But the car itself never had a real develop from the company, so it always remained something in the middle, something in between, and it was something that he really missed to be competitive against Jaguar, against the real late Group C coming from the develop of the Series 962 Porsche itself. You know, they arrived in the end of the 19th still racing. The 956 962 project was something that raced for 20 years nearly, you know, and nearly always winning it, and it was nearly like funny, you know, to see these vehicles in reality. I remember that I seen the 1,000 kilometer of Monza, I think it was 98 that year, you know, with this car racing, and also the latest evolution of the 962 956. If you see in my videos, you see how many times I made models about the 962 and 956 Porsche. Is really a prototype that I really love, you know. But in reality, it was frustrating because to see this Ferrari compared to them racing in the same category, so it was not an historical event when they drive to save the model, when they drive to save the car. They really were seriously driving, you know. It was the actual car racing in the category, so it was not an historical event with all the limits of the historical limit, as when you see the historical Formula One driven and you say, okay, but they go so slow. They were not driven like you see in today events, you know. They were really driven brutally on the road. And I remember that especially Monza was ridiculous because this car was you know, looking just with the eyes, the perception of the speed and the power was double than the Porsche, was exactly double. And I remember that Giampiero Moretti, and I think at the time, I think it was somebody like Montermini, can it be? It was two Italian pilots, real pro drivers, and Giampiero Moretti. Giampiero Moretti was a gentleman driver. I think he's passed away some years ago right now. Just loving the car exactly like I do, you know, not a pilot at all, but loving the car. I do it in 124 scale, it makes in 1:1 scale. And I remember that it was impressive to see the speed of this object on the Monza track. It was really flying over the others. And I remember that during the 1,000 kilometer of Monza, it was funny because every time that the pro drivers went outside, the car was fast like hell and set the hot lap every time. And every time that Moretti took the car, instead it was much slower, much worse. So all the work made by the pro driver was completely destroyed by Moretti himself because, you know, he was the owner of the car, so he can make it. And I badly love this this model. You know, after this little longer introduction about the real vehicle, and I think it was important because right now they are talking again about hypercars, and the prototypes car hypercars was exactly the C group car of the 80s. So we are returning back in time, so the lines becomes nicer, becomes much more aggressive, whatever you want, modern, different LED light or whatever, you know. But the idea, the concept was something extreme with the maximum technology that you have in the air. It was exactly the regulation of the beginning of the C group, you know. Then after time by time they discover, as they probably will do with the hypercars, that they will become much more expensive than any Formula One car, because the car is indeed much more complicated for aerodynamics and for all the small parts that are not present in the Formula One car, you know. Just the fact to have covered wheels involves that the countings for the loading of the air all around the car becomes something more that is very different from a Formula One car. So I wanted to keep back to life this project of the 333 SP. I just seen that recently Model Factory Hero is announcing and producing, I think already right now, the modeling 112 of this wonderful car. And I was lucky because this model was kind of common in I think in the early 2000s, you know, in 124 scale, because BBR tried to sell this model in 124 scale, but the 124 scale is not so loved by the collectors, you know, and BBR is mostly a company that right now I think they just produce finished models. Back in time, they used also to provide the kit for this model, so it was possible for you to buy the finished version of the 333, but was much more easy to buy the kit, the resin kit, like this one, to build up this model, you know. And looking at the shape, you know, that Dallara made, you see a lot of nice details that are typical from Dallara. You know, Dallara is usually making this kind of shape, like a kind of Coca-Cola bottle over the body of the car. I don't know if it is like the rules of the areas for planes or something like that, but it's really similar. You know, it's not straight like in the Porsche, like in the Jaguar, like in the Nissan and so on. Usually they have straight side parts. You know, instead this one is very curvy, and the model itself, it's extremely simple, you know. So I built up this model, I think, as I said, 20 years ago, and I was quite satisfied with it, but it was my hand and my skill of 20 years ago, and I was basically a military modeler, so I didn't know so much about the model, didn't know so much about the details that this model can be finished in, you know. And I was satisfied, but not so satisfied like I am for my actual models, you know. So I wanted to do it again and again, and then started to search this model back in the days, you know. And I crossed, I think, 2 boxes of this that I made a big mistake, the huge mistake to sell them. One was the pilot version, because BBR made all the version of this car, you know. There was basically 3 or 4 version of this model, you know. This was the IMSA Daytona racer, so you have the car that have nearly no windshield here. This was a covering with rivets, and the very little transparent part is a kind of funny protection, you know. It doesn't protect at all the pilot that is driving in this position. And the side panels were very different, because this has this Venturi intake here, where you have a side of a skirt here, you know. It's a different part made in they provided in a big huge photo etched set, you know. And the front end was completely different, because they tried to create a kind of spoiler with the front end, you know, making this way, so going down and straight again. But there was other version, you know, for the sprint races and so on, with the short nose, and you can see that because the car looks much more shorter in the front, and the lights are completely different, in a different position, you know. This is the light from Daytona configuration, instead that the front, all the front clip was different. And indeed, Model Factory Hero preparing now the model is already separating the part, because probably if you just give basically is in a kind of 80%, 70 to 80% completely different body, you know, because you change the front clip completely, so with this part, with this windshield, with the nose and the side skirts and so on. And also this model was dramatically famous, because I think it was in Road Atlanta where this happened. There have been a huge accident from Fabrizio Barbazza. Fabrizio Barbazza was a very skilled driver from Monza himself, you know. A very skilled one. He had a horrific crash. I remember it so well with this car. It was not exactly this model, because it was the other version with the big air intake on this side. There was another version with a big air intake for the radiators, you know. Instead, in this model, probably the air for the air intakes was taken from another position. You know, instead, the Barbazza car was a yellow one, was a yellow car. If you search in YouTube for Barbazza crash, you will see something extremely scary. And I remember an interview to the pilot where he also reported the aftermatch of the crash was absolutely scary, guys. Something that if you hear, you say, okay, this is your moment. Is something similar like Zanardi crash, you know. And so for me it was very important to try to save this model, because actually, of course, when I get interested again in the model, I didn't have any longer the possibility to have the original model from BBR. BBR don't produce this stuff any longer in 1/24 scale. And I was just lucky, because, you know, when you have to strip it down the model, you get a little here is the deck and shit. When you have to strip it down the model, you have quite a question that you have to place about yourself. First of all, how will it react to all the products to take away the paint and so on? And now I try to hold on a little, because I just have 2 hands still. Try to show you, you know. So first of all, I had a request to refine some decal sheet, and I tried to contact that once the company BBR. I was one of their client and also back in time one of their mounters, but I kept in touch with the company because basically I wanted to replace the front light that I didn't have in vacuum form parts, and in this I was lucky because the company still had, surprisingly, some transparent part. The lady there in the BBR didn't understand which version did I have, so without any problem they probably sent me all the version that they made. So I have both the Daytona front lights, both the street version, and both the, you cannot see so well from the images, but they are three different set, and also the street car version, because this model also was present like kind of ordinary road plated vehicle. There was some picture, about the regulation of this category. It was strange because it was at the time of the WSC championship, after the C group, but before the LMP category. So it was a mess. Probably that was the main reason why Ferrari didn't want to get so involved in the project, that was a little bit foggy. It is not like today that that there is the Le Mans series. It's a race that they give the name to a series, so it's the Le Mans. There's the GT3, so it's probably much more worth it for the company to be inside such kind of problem. Instead, this here, so this is late 90s. You have to figure it out like something that is really coming from the past. Despite the car is, of course, wonderful. It's another line. Made by Giampaolo Dallara, similar, I don't know, the nicest prototype ever. He made some of the Dallara, also the small one. There is some smaller objects similar to this racing in the Il Clims in Italy. They are amazing, using the BMW engine turbo. It's amazing series, very, very risky. Also for this stuff, search in YouTube, because you will see a lot of amazing images of how people drive in the mountains. I'm scared to drive an SUV on the mountains. They drive 300 kilometers per hour on the mountains, so it's different, And the car itself was absolutely fantastic then. The model, by the way, have some limits, because when I completely strip it down, the paint of the model, I noticed that already at the time it was one of my first model finished in the 2K finishing. Despite after so many years, the car was still glossy, was still very, very nice in look. I probably made a test also at the time, because I was not thinking for a kind of mistakes that I made in the execution of the model, to have a bright red colored version. So I made it dirt like in the end of the race. It was quite nice for the beginning, but it's also similar because also I think Hot Wheels proposed that in 1/18 scale, like a dirt model, but usually in this hobby it's very difficult that you will like something even more if something so special like this in a dirty way. I mean, they are funny to see, they are very, very interesting to do, but after a while you get tired of them. You want to see just the real shape of the real model, so, or the real car, of course. You don't want to see so much dirty items. Dirty items, if I think about that, I can think about something like a 962, like a real endurance, but ordinary plastic kit, not at all over a resin and ultra rare item like this became. From what I remember about the 333 SP, there have been other models made by, I think it was Perry Racing, American company. I just read about it and never had it in my hands. And everybody talked very, very good of that, because the shape was really well done. And the main difference between them and this model from BBR, in my opinion, the BBR is anyway nicer in the shape from the images that I've seen of the Perry Racing model. Usually the Perry Racing you can cross on eBay or in some marketplace at a stellar price. They ask very big money for such model. Probably it is worth it because it is the only one remaining, while this one is really disappearing. And at the time, I remember, it was neither so expensive. We are talking of something that was in the line of 150,000 Italian lire. Italian lira back in time was something like 70 euro, 80 euro, so it's not expensive at all, like a model. So the Perry Racing, I never found the model under $300, something like that. The main difference between the Perry Racing and the BBR, as we said, is a brick of resin, as you can see. Here it is. You see, it's a brick of resin, very, very big. They used to work with a very nice resin, but nice for the industrial purpose of BBR. These models in the factory are usually painted in O1, so in O1 anyway you have to go to 40, nearly 50 degrees for the painting to make the 2K gloss crystallize over the model and became that candy effect, that was even more popular in the 90s. Today they are making much more better, honestly, and usually they make this effect in much bigger scale. So when I see modelers still using the 2K without the proper knowledge of it, there is many modelers in Italy that I well know, they do incredible stuff with the 2K, but there is a lot of newbie guys that simply buy the 2K. The 2K basically is the Legler 2K, the same stuff that you can buy from Zero Paints and so on. If you are not ultra skilled in prepare, the proportion is a 3-part. I should also have here somewhere in my mess, I think, deep up there it should be. Is a 3-component resin that you have to apply to the model. So it's very critical that you prepare the correct mix, 33, 33, 33, and then you see if your airbrush is in the way to do it, and you have to consider the climate conditions. So it becomes a little bit tricky. So it's very easy that you see newbies trying to make this 2K effect, and they became just glossy like glass, like really like neither mirror finishing, like really like a sucked candy, I used to say. So for me, it's not so nice to see, but that is a personal opinion. So in this model, I did the same because that was also one of my mistakes. So I made it completely glossy, and to strip it down was absolutely tricky, because then the paint itself became like a kind of ceramic over the body, and it's very difficult to take it away. I tried and tried, but if you can see, I hope you can see, maybe here, when I scratched the model, I also damaged a little the resin body shell. This is a very strange resin that they use. It is not at all like in my models, that yellow one that many of you have in your hands buying my kits. This was down there where there is here maybe with the shadow, you can see that it is scratched, you see that area. And definitely I have to fix it in a better way. I have to make it much more precise, for an eventual production resin. But my purpose will be on this model of the BBR to strip it down completely like I did, and then make my own conversion to empty all this. You see all these bricks. This is really technical part from BBR to make them probably over some machines, but you see that is made in the purpose to be big. To be big means that they don't have any feeling of the temperature of the ovens when these models are used to be placed during the painting process. Also I remember that because I was quite young at the time, I also damaged the side body here, that is green putty from Squadron, and you see that after 23 years it's still lasting pretty good. I will probably sketch it down anyway completely and refill it with modern, or use it like an underbase, with modern filler. The same under here, of course. This was a part that cannot be, if you see that properly, cannot be so detailed, and there is some holes, so the resin have to be cured, but my main idea will be to empty quite completely this rear part and provide, the possibility to make this model in a reissue that I will make, and this will be something impressive, because we have a complete kit this time. I have in progress right now that they gave me some problem because, guys, they are deadly expensive to produce. You have to understand this. I love to produce resin kit, but we're talking of kind of very big money involved to produce an entire kit in resin. Add to this that there is a kind of complication with the casting process and the company, so the company they are making this service is a little bit messed up, and so it's difficult to do this stuff. But I want to prepare a third complete model. Right now I have the 156 car from Giovanardi, the Alfa Romeo, racing in the what was that, WTCC, and I also finished the Lancia Delta ECV1 prototype, the red Lancia Delta prototype after the Delta S4, and this will be probably my third complete kit, but still now the complete one I didn't have the possibility to make because I give the precedence to what is something much more easy. I also remember that I have to recast again probably in an even better shape because I changed the roof of that, the 1974 Porsche RSR, so we will see about that. But right now I go on, I'm going to Sweden very soon, and I'm preparing some of the items that I want to do in my office up there, in my studio up there. So I want to prepare a lot of works for the season right now. And the idea then will be to completely drill out all this material down here and to make the possibility, providing something like this. This is just a mock-up of what's looking like, to have the proportion, to have the position, mostly about the axle, about the trans axle, and about the block of the 12 cylinder of the Ferrari, because the idea will be to provide a basic of the mechanical, at least to make you able to do something, of course by your own, because this is a limited production items, and that is not like an ordinary kit, but the proportion is the same, so I was kind of lucky because I saved, there it is, I saved some parts from a Rebel F50, and the Rebel F50 engine was not so bad. Of course, it's not a Tamiya, but if you see the picture of the real motor of the 333 SP, it was not exactly the motor of the F50, so it had to be modified. Of course, all the suspension area here is completely different. If you see the picture, there is two coil springs, much more similar to the suspension of a Formula 1 car. Of course, this is the suspension of the street F50 that have to be completely cut away, but I needed to have the proportion of this, the proportion of how does it look inside the body, and I think the position of the axle is nearly matching, and this will be the upper part. So my idea will be that if all this area will be drilled out and clean in some way, also raw, you can decide by your own if to place the engine inside or not, and I will provide kind of basic parts, for this one. We will see about the air scope, because the air scope looks a little bit tricky and complicated, so I don't know right now if I want to go deep and try to drill also down there, probably just the beginning, or simply leave it like it is, because if you place it in a position, just open it, it's very difficult that you go under and check. Of course, I cannot drill it out precisely like if they are molded in vacuum form parts and so on. It is not neither a slot car, so it probably have to remain fixed, also because it's quite thick, and this surely maintains also kind of resistance during the casting process. So we will see about that, or drill just a little bit, just an inner part. We will see about that. We will see about that in the long winter nights up in Sweden waiting for me, and also the brakes. I don't remember if these parts down there were separated, probably yes, but also in this model, this was one of the first one that I assembled, used proper glue, and I guarantee you guys that if you use the proper stuff, after 22 years the glue is still there making their dirty job, so they are strong like hell. That was probably a big component resin that I used for this project, and it was is much more likely to destroy the resin than to cut it away. It was also tricky to clean the front glass. To clean it properly was not so easy at all. So the idea will be to provide something extremely workable. I like that when people buy my models, of course they have to like the subject. That is basically, my Corvette, my NSX, my narrow Porsche, the trucks, But then you have to know, and that there is a lot of modeling skill involved in this stuff. Not mine, but yours. The people that make it, as I always say, it's more skilled than me. So if I can make it, I just think, as I seen the people from Facebook and so on, also recently, I've seen an excellent model. They just can do it better than me. So that is my purpose. I just want to provide something that is a very nice and pretty decent base to make something exciting, to make something interesting. There is the debris of the metal parts, have a quick look. That is everything. Last note, I was also, when I ordered the transparent parts, there it is, the transparent parts from the front. I also tried to make the long shot and ask for a spare decal sheet, and they say yes, it's still available, and they sent me this deck 37 number, and I was so happy, freaking happy, yeah, I get it. Then I was looking at that a little bit, and I said, didn't they look a little bigger than as they should be? The writing Momo with the Ferrari shield should sit there, and is way larger than the light. So yes, probably this was decal sheet made for the Hot Wheels model 118. Strangely, because I also have the Momo version of this car made directly from Hot Wheels because I loved the car. And okay, I have it if somebody needs a decal sheet in 118 of the Momo Daytona winner car. And I think it's also from the Hot Wheels model because they were very easy to get. So the model was from nearly 15 years before the release of this decal sheet. And I also was a little bit surprised because I remember that the original decal sheet didn't have this red covering, and the red covering is because in the original Hot Wheels model this part is black. If you see, that is the street black version, you know. So you have to convert basically that to obtain this. But once again, being 118 scale, there is no clue I can make it, so it will stay there forever, you know. If anybody needs, just contact me. And that's it. The final parts are here, you know. I saved some debris. I try to clean everything. This was the side skirt that they provide on the side that have to be cleaned. I have to study a decent way to realize they're quite thick in the material. Is not a thickness that you have today in modern photo etch set, you know. This is much bigger, you know. They will use it to work with brass. Today when I do photo etch part, usually they are made in alpaca. Is very, I don't know if alpaca is the correct name in English of the material. Is a very light metal, you know, very easy to folder. Instead this is much harder, you know, much rigid, much solid. And this was, to have an idea, have a look of the cast, you know. You see the cast is pretty rough, and I already cleaned it, but this have to be fixed, you know, like the entire body. So it's something that will take some time of long preparation and so on. This was my optimistical driver seat. I don't know why I made it in brown, no idea, you know. And small debris and so on, small photo etched parts. I will make it as simple as possible, as simple as I can. But of course, being a complete model, I will try to keep everything in a way that all the parts, all the photo etched parts and so on, can already be molded on the model. You know, you don't need to have separate. If when I will study properly the model, if there is any needing. This was the frame of the rear mounting of the main wing. You see that in reality it should be completely opened. This was completely closed, but it's okay, you know. You have always to see this stuff like something coming from back in time. So that's it. I would like to make some more videos about this excellent and wonderful model made by BBR during the preparation of that. And so stay tuned, guys. If you like it, just follow the episode of this series. Thank you.